Hi, how are
How
you?
are you? Good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you so much once again for being willing to do this with us. We're super excited to get to talk with you today.
Sure thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you're in Ohio, right? Or
I'm in,
Indiana. Sorry.
I'm in Northeast Indiana, about
Yeah.
30 minutes south of Fort Wayne.
Okay. Is that the same time zone
As
uh,
Ohio or as Florida?
as Florida?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yay. So I'll just start by introducing everybody who's here today.
Okay.
So you know me, I'm Melody. So I've been the one bugging you on the messenger. And then over here, I don't know if you can see Shelby. Shelby is here. And
Hello.
she is music theory and piano performance major. And then we have William, who is a undergrad piano performance major as well. Stephanie Archer, and you'll get to see all of them. She's a PhD student as well in piano pedagogy program, and Braden is a master's student piano performance, and Renee is a master's student piano pedagogy. So, yeah, so that's everybody. So, yeah, I think just wanted to. We have a list of some questions we wanted to ask, and let me just open it here. So, Braden,
So
do you want to?
real quick, just to confirm, you said, so you're an MTNA collegiate chapter, right?
Our MTNA collegiate chapter, yes.
Yep. And everybody is basically master's and doctoral students, correct? Is that?
It's kind of a mix. Yeah.
Okay.
2 masters and 2 undergrads here today.
Undergrad. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I kind of lost track as you were introducing them. Sorry.
I know. I just like spitting through them. Yeah, we have kind of a hodgepodge of everyone, which makes it more exciting. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. If you guys have an order that you wanted
Yeah, I
to.
can start as well.
Okay. Awesome.
So the first question we had was, when did you begin taking piano lessons as a kid?
I started lessons when I was 7 years old. So my mom took me to a local teacher that was maybe 5-minute drive away. But for the entire first year of lessons, I went to a neighbor's house to practice. So they just wanted to make sure I wanted to stick with it. And, they couldn't quite afford a piano right away. So that was a way of kind of offsetting that. So pretty much took lessons ever since.
When did you begin teaching piano?
I started teaching piano, I think as soon as I graduated high school. I ended up moving like the day after I graduated high school to Eastern Ohio to live with family. Now I'm trying to remember now that I'm saying that. Okay, hang on a second. I think I might have taught like a couple of students like as a senior in high school, like in the summers or something like that, but they were very short stints. And then I moved to Eastern Ohio after I graduated high school to work at my uncle's church for the summers. And in between there, like, I don't know how it happened, but I ended up having a few students like while I was in college in the summers. I was a piano major in my undergrad, but my actual degree that I was working on was K through 12 choral education. And so in those times, like when I was home from school, I would teach piano lessons out of my parents' house, just in the front room that they had, with just a very small handful of students. And then from there, once I got my degree in choral education, I taught piano like in the afternoons after I had my first job. So I was, school teacher, and then I would come home and have students maybe 2 nights a week. I think I had maybe 7 or 8 students in those very early days. And I did that for the first 3 years of my career, if you will, after undergrad. And in that time, I always wanted to, I don't know, I just had this desire to be a better piano teacher. I'd never wanted to be like what I always call like Aunt Jane next door, giving piano lessons on the, on the side. I actually wanted to like make a business of it and do it well. So after 3 years of teaching choir, I realized that it was not the direction I wanted to take, but I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And in that time, my husband ended up getting a job with his current company in Australia. So we actually moved overseas for 2 years. And in that time, I continued to teach piano lessons because it was an easy thing that I could do, which is one of the bonuses of, teaching instruments like this is there's a lot of flexibility with how you do it and so forth. So that's a really great thing. So I had maybe 8 students, again, a couple of nights a week. I would be a temp at offices. Like I work at Nintendo Australia for like 6 months in their customer service. And then I would teach, 8 students a couple nights a week. And that was for 2 years. So that was basically let's say 5-year period where I taught a very small number of students as a side. And then once we returned home from Australia, I was kind of at a crossroads, like, okay, what do I do now? Do I go back to the choral thing? What do I want to do? And I still had that desire to teach piano. And I ended up meeting with the pedagogy professor at Ball State University in Muncie. Before we had moved over, I'd actually applied to go back to school to work on my master's degree in just like general arts education. And they just contacted me, like it was kind of out of the blue. We had gotten home and they're like, hey, we were looking through our files. We found your application here. Are you interested in coming to work on your master's degree at Ball State? And turns out after I talked to the pedagogy professor, they had an assistantship available for teaching piano lessons in my hometown. And crazy thing, when my husband and I had moved back from Australia, this was like in the economic downfall of 2009, 2008, 2009. So he had actually lost his job in the process, and we were living with my parents and we're living in my hometown. So it was kind of like the perfect like evolution of things. And it was one of those things, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, So I ended up going back to get my master's degree in piano pedagogy and performance. And I taught piano lessons in that time for our local community arts program. And it was sponsored, through the school. Basically, I was paid as an assistant, but then the community arts program sponsored it. So anyway, did that for the 2 years through my master's degree. And then once I got my degree, we knew that we wanted to come back to the town where I had been a choral director previously before we moved to Australia. We just really liked the town. And also we saw it as a good opportunity because it was a good location. We just felt like the community really needed a piano teacher, and it would be a great place to like open a business. Plus I knew a lot of people already. And so it was a good way to get established. So, so we ended up opening the full-time business. And then for 2 years, when I first opened the studio, I continued to teach at my hometown. I would drive 45 minutes, 2 days a week to keep those students while I was kind of building my own business. So that was a great opportunity as well. And that's been, now I'm in my 11th year, I believe, on my own, the full-time studio. So I hope that was kind of more than just when did you start piano lessons, but that's kind of the whole evolution. And maybe that already answered more of your questions on how piano lessons have played into my career slowly, little by little, progressively. So.
Very cool. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So next question is, what is the story of how you came up with your blog?
Okay. No, it's great. Great question. It's fun. So after I had opened my piano studio, this would have been 2011 after I graduated, I was really focused on building that business for the first few years. I would say after about 5 years, I just kind of felt inspired and interested in doing more. I'm just always kind of had a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit, I guess you could say, and just doing things a little bit differently, and very highly motivated person. And I was chatting with a good friend of mine. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joy Moore, Another Color in my piano blog. She's been around even longer than me. But we were in grad school at the same time. We were rooming together at the National Conference for Keyboard Pedagogy in Chicago back in 2015, and just, chatting about like ideas and things. And I started running it by her. I was like, you know what? I've been really having this desire to maybe start a blog of my own, but I really don't know what I'm going to do with it or where I'm going to go with it. And so she just really encouraged me to do it. And that wasn't enough for me to be like, okay, I could do this. So I just started the blog, and she helped me brainstorm the idea too. I called it Piano Pantry because I also enjoy cooking a lot. And actually back when we went to Australia and I was trying to figure out, okay, where's my career going? What am I going to do with my life? one of those possibilities was like, maybe I should just go be a chef. Like I enjoyed cooking enough, like it's either chef school or it's music school. So the whole, assistantship and pedagogy program kind of chose that for me in a way. Like I just didn't really know for sure which direction I wanted to go. And it was kind of like, laying it in my lap. So anyways, the Piano Pantry turn was like, okay, I could kind of take this in different directions if I wanted to, if I wanted to become more of a food blog, I could play around with that or whatever. So, it's always, for the most part, just been more focused. It's a piano teaching blog website, but it's slowly evolved over the years. So again, like I said, I started back in 2016, and trying to think of the evolution of it from there. I always kind of chit chat about food things a little bit more, just like posting favorite links to recipes and stuff like that. But I started presenting like at national conferences and stuff. And that has kind of evolved from just being a blog, like the old fashioned blog, you could say, to having opportunities to actually travel and speak to teacher groups and get paid to do so. So that's kind of been like a next step in the tier of building a career that's not just focused on, one particular element. So that, and then kind of tumbling from that, then I started offering consulting services more as a means of giving teachers an opportunity to get help besides just like the 3-line emails I can send when they call asking for advice. So that's kind of a relatively new thing, but yeah, that's kind of the story of the blog and where it's evolved from a simple blog back in 2016 till now.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask. Hey Amy, so I've been following your blog and on social media and things for a while, and I've noticed that something you do with your studio is you incorporate group teaching with your private students. So I was just wondering kind of how you go about structuring that, what kinds of activities you do, how frequently do you have classes like that?
So I went through a whole evolution with group classes from the start of my studio. When I first opened my studio, recreational music making was really big, which is, adult lessons and stuff like that. And I actually started doing that for the first couple of years where I would offer adults, groups of 4 people at a time. And it was an involved class where they were all, we were together and we were making music. And I also had originally started my students in that way, like, okay, beginner students are going to start in a group class. But the challenge that I quickly found, which is nothing new in this world, is just scheduling kids at the same time and getting enough of kids, lined up at the same amount of time to actually do a group class. So eventually I kind of went away from the group lesson, like on a weekly basis kind of a thing as their mainstay, back into all private lessons. But then the group lesson is more of a supplemental type of activity. I won't go through the whole progression of exactly how I worked my way through it. If you're interested in specifics, I'll point you to a podcast that I just published like last month. It is like 10 minutes of my specific experiences on the evolution of group classes in my studio and how I kind of worked my way through all these experiences and what I learned from each and so forth. So I'll point you towards that. But the short story of that is I started with doing group classes the same week as their lessons. So like they would have a lesson that week, and then this would be a bonus thing on top of that. And eventually what I found is that was just really exhausting to run a full studio week and then to also be planning group classes on top of that. And, you'd have to do the group classes later in the evenings after all your lessons. And it just got to be a bit much. So ultimately the good balance has been including group classes about every 5 to 6 weeks. So, we have 5 weeks of lessons, and then that 6th week, nobody has a private lesson and they come for a 75-minute group class. I have done 60-minute group classes. I've done hour-and-a-half group classes. 75 minutes is a nice balance. It has given us plenty of time to do student performances, to play games. Hang on just a second. Okay, to play games and so forth. And then I had like a 15-minute break between each one. So it gives me a little bit of space to like reset the studio, but gives us enough time to have a class. And usually I do like 3 to 5 students, sometimes 6 students in a class. I find that if you get 5 or 6 can start to get harder, like as far as playing games goes, just you get too many kids and then you have too many performances that take too long, as part of the class. So yeah, that's been a really nice balance. And then students end up having those classes about 6 to 7 times throughout the school year. And it's just a nice break. Like it's a nice break for the kids. It gives them a chance to like have community and meet other kids in the studio. It's a nice break for me too, because instead of teaching, usually I do 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday. When I do the group classes, I try to squeeze them into Monday and Tuesday only, sometimes Wednesday, but that gives me a week to kind of reset. I feel like I can catch up on things, maybe have an extra day off. And that's really, really life-giving rather than just having a continuous schedule every single week back after back. It kind of gives you a little breather. So that's how group classes work in my studio.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for explaining your group class setup. I was just wondering, with only having it every 5 or 6 weeks, how in depth do you make your plans for the group class? Do you try to coordinate that with what your students are doing in your private lessons? How much detail goes into those? And how do you maintain consistency when you're only seeing students all together once a month or so?
I don't feel like I like have a consistent plan like for the entire year. Like we're going to cover these items this year in group classes and we're going to learn these things, check. I kind of just take each one for what it is and the kids that are in it. So I just, whatever level those students are at, I try to just pick games and activities that are supporting what they're currently learning in their lessons in that particular time. I've been a little bit more structured in the past, but I don't know, the more you do it, the more you kind of get used to the planning. And I don't know, I don't want to say I wing it, but I've got a lot of games and stuff that I can easily pull out at any time. So for example, like in April, we do a note naming challenge. The whole studio does it for the whole entire month. It's called the 1 Minute Club. Everybody does it. So maybe in group classes in April, everybody will play a couple of games focused on note names or something like that. And their last group class of the year in May, we do more like performance-based activities because it's the week right before our recital, different things like that. So I hope that answers your question. You can ask more if it didn't.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I just want to take a second to introduce our other participant on the meeting, Amalia, and say welcome. Sorry, Molly, I didn't.
Hello.
But yeah, and also if Amalia, you either feel free to just listen, or if you have any questions, feel free to chime in at any point. Yeah. Okay. So
Well, you want to
yeah. So one of my questions was kind of the age-old question: like, how do you keep your students motivated and practicing? Like I've kept up with your blog a little bit, and I've seen and your Instagram, and I've seen you do different sorts of certificates at the end of things, and you have a lot going on, and that's great. But for the week to week, how do you keep them going, and how do you deal with maybe instances where the practicing is not happening as much?
Great question. It's like the end all question, it feels like in music lessons at times. I feel like I've learned over the years to just take it in stride, and piano lessons and music lessons are not the only things in kids' lives. I guess I don't try to put forth specific plans to motivate my students. I just try to give them music that motivates them and things that they enjoy that motivates them. I've tried practice activities over the years, here's a 100-day practice challenge. And if you do this, you get this, prize at the end or something like that. And I don't know, I think everybody's studio is different and all kids are different. I've never had a ton of success with things like that. One year I did like monthly challenges. So, the month of September, the goal was for them to master like 7 pieces in their lesson book or something. The month of October, the goal was for them to practice 10 days in a row at some point in the month. And for each thing, then they would get something like $5 or something. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a few years, but I don't know. A lot of stuff like that it's a lot of effort for the teacher as well to do that kind of stuff. And I kind of just got burnt out with it and didn't really feel like it was motivating for all of my students enough to like put the effort to do those kinds of things all the time. Now, I don't think that they're bad, or that I shouldn't be doing them, but I'm encouraged to not feel like you have to rely on those things to motivate your students. Like, find what motivates them personally. Like, what is something that they enjoy? Like, maybe they're into video games, so you find music on video games for them without even them asking or something like that. Maybe they are a student that's motivated by stickers, so you create a sticker chart, and every time they practice, they put one little sticker on, and then they get a candy bar at the end or something like that. Like, you can try to do little custom ones for individual students. And I don't think you even have to do, if you're doing something like that for one student, it's not like you have to do something for every single student necessarily. Like, whatever motivates that student in time. And maybe in 6 months, that student won't be motivated by stickers anymore, So yeah, I think just learn your students. And if they come to lessons and they haven't practiced, okay, well, we'll work on your pieces. We'll maybe play some extra games, and we'll have some time to do stuff we don't normally have time to do. And we'll go on till next week. Now, if it becomes chronic, like they don't ever practice and it's been a month, well, that's a whole nother story. But I mean, I honestly feel like I've never really had that issue completely ongoing, where it's just like you have students that come and they never practice and they're never prepared. I feel like families and kids go in seasons, and the best thing you can do for yourself is to not stress about it and to just like meet that student where they are in the moment and just have a musical experience with them. Like, just going to the goal of the lesson of like, okay, we're going to create music, even if it means we're not like progressing on every single piece every single week. That's okay. Right. So
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Very helpful.
Okay, so yeah, thanks so much for that. I wanted to ask you specifically like about what's your process like when you're interviewing or accepting a new student?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I've always tried to avoid the word interview. In my early days, you read things about that, like interviewing students so that they fit in your studio and, your personalities fit and everything. And I don't know, I just never got to that point where maybe if I was in, I don't know, like we have a university professor and I only had so many students, and I don't know, like maybe it's a different situation for other teachers, but I've just always accepted any student that wants to take piano lessons, like no matter what. My interview is just a meeting. Like, let's have a first meeting, let's get together. Just so that we get to meet each other in person. I will do a short little like 10-minute lesson, if you will, with a student, especially if they're younger. Like, I'll maybe teach them the notes on the piano, and we'll play a little rote piece that I can just show them so that they leave that little meeting and they can successfully play a song already, and just then to be able to sit face to face with the parent and say, okay, this is, what my lessons are like. This is what my policies are. And you kind of lay them out. This is my fees and so forth. Now, go ahead and take that home with you, and then let me know, once you decide which way you want to go. Either way is fine. So I've never felt like I have to audition students or parents. Now, I've been lucky. I've never had a situation like this, but I imagine there probably are situations where you've had people come in and you just think, this does not feel right. Like, this student does not feel right to me. This parent feels like this is not going to be the kind of parent that I want in my studio. That's okay. You have the right to say, I don't think that this would be a, good relationship, or I'm not going to be able to accept you into my studio at this time. However, here's a list of other teachers in the area you could contact. So I don't think you ever have to feel pressure to take someone on just because you meet with them. But yeah, luckily I've never had that experience, but I know it does happen. So.
Yeah, thank you. I also have other question. So you're always so busy at your blog and research and presenting, and like you're always doing a million things, and like your recipes. Yeah. I was just wondering, especially this semester, I've been like, oh my gosh, how do I balance all of this stuff? Like, how do you what are some maybe strategies that you use for like balancing and prioritizing certain things? And I was also wondering, do you have any like tangible like tools, like apps or anything that you use to keep yourself organized?
Oh yes, that's my sweet spot. Actually, the whole Piano Pantry thing, I didn't really talk about this when I first talked about the blog, but I had mentioned before that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. Like, what am I going to want to talk about specifically? I just didn't know. And what I have come to find as I just kind of start, writing things, and I was paying attention to what felt good to me and natural, was that organization and productivity were actually some of my favorite topics. I love talking about piano teaching as well, but I wasn't like so much as of a pedagogically focused, how students learn and, teaching practices all the time. It was more about like, oh, how can we organize our business, or how can we be more effective in managing our studios and stuff like that. So I enjoy that side. So as far as apps go, you'll probably have to reread your question to me in a second, but as far as apps go, I have always used Evernote for a long time. It was like the best thing out there. I have like a whole series on my website of video tutorials trying to show teachers how to use it in their studios in an effective way. And this has been a very new evolution for me, but in the last year, I actually have been moving out of Evernote and into Notion. Notion is kind of similar to Evernote, but it has a slightly different feel to it and just the way that things move. And I really have been loving it. And so I'm kind of I'm still using Evernote, but I use it more of like a dump station where I just kind of dump a lot of things, and I can easily search old articles that I have liked in the past, where I'm now organizing my life a lot more in Notion. So tips as far as organizing, I always encourage people to think about big picture things in your life. So whether it's about goals that I want to do, or how I'm balancing my life, or how I, use apps to organize things, I always kind of start with personal things. And then the next level is my studio, my piano studio. And then the next level is, say, then Piano Pantry. So it's kind of like, what are some big things that you have going on? Maybe you have a church job, and then you organize down from there. So from my studio, then, I might organize things by studio management, and then teaching tools, and then teaching aids and stuff like that. So I don't want to get too detailed into that, but that's how I use Notion as well. So I have a whole section for my podcast, and then I keep all of my episodes in there. I have a section for presenting, a section for, MTNA related topics and stuff like that. So always kind of start with big picture items, and then it's kind of like a family tree from there. So yeah, Notion is big, Evernote is big. Can you reread the first half of your question? Because I know I have a lot to say about that, but I can't remember exactly how you worded it.
Oh, I think I was just asking like if you had like certain strategies for like just balancing and prioritizing so many things.
Okay. Let's see. Let me think for a second. I lost my train of thought. I think one of the things that has been most important over the years for me is paying attention. Just like paying attention to how things are making you feel. And like, sometimes you look back and you don't realize that maybe you were as stressed as you were in the moment. And I remember grad school, and that was one of the hardest times of my life. So I'm just going to tell you guys now, I don't know that there's any making it easier. It's 2 years of your life, and it'll be gone eventually.
Without advice.
Let's just be real here. Okay. I mean, I remember like getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and, driving, and then spending 4 hours practicing, and not feeling like I could even go to the store to get a brand new pair of jeans because I didn't have time, I mean, like, so yeah, so I definitely get that. Yeah, I don't have any specifics. It's just paying attention to yourself and, the people around you too, like, are you spending time with people? Are you doing everything that you need to get done? Are you actually taking time for yourself? But as far as, I do have another thought on that, and I just remembered, in my studio, like for years, I taught 5 days a week. And then I was paying attention and I was like, I feel exhausted. I feel like I can't give enough to these students on Fridays. So by Friday, I finally decided after about 6 years to take Fridays off. And okay, I'm going to get all my teaching Monday to Thursday. And that was really huge. And that also ties back to the group class thing that I was talking about, where I was trying different things and I was experiencing different ways of doing things and then paying attention to how they affected me, how they affected my students and so forth. And, like with the group class thing, like I said, I was doing it on top of lessons for a long time and it was just too exhausting. So I, changed my strategy a little bit and found better balance. I think we just have to rethink things like frequently. I think we have to like not just be like, okay, this is how I'm doing stuff like for the next year or two or whatever, like every 6 months, maybe, okay, is this working for me? Like maybe this semester, is there something I can do differently in my studio or, that I can change to make things just a little bit easier. There was one year, so I didn't do Fridays for several years. And then a couple of years ago, I just suddenly felt like, you know what, I want to take on more students. I feel like I could teach 5 days a week again. So I did Fridays again for a couple of years. I would only teach like 4 students in the afternoons. But then eventually I kind of started having that feeling again, like this is just too much. Now I remember why I did it. And, and then I went back to, just on Thursdays or teaching till Thursdays. One thing that I did at the beginning of my teaching, and I would encourage you to do, is to make notes to yourself. Like sometimes it's easy to forget like things that you learn along the way. I am not a journaling person. I'm not one to like, write a diary or anything, but in my group class scheduling Excel spreadsheet, I just made bullet points to myself every year. What did I learn from this experience? I just had things like 60 minutes is not long enough, or let's say another example. Don't do group classes on Friday afternoons, or don't, schedule students that are too far apart in age, or try to schedule siblings in different group classes so that they're not always coming to piano lessons together. Like I would make little notes to myself. And then when those things would come around again in 6 months or a year, I'd be like, oh yes, now I remember why I decided to do this. Like now I remember why I didn't teach students in the summertime on Wednesdays or whatever, So making little notes as you experience things along the way can be very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That helps a lot. Like I said, I'm still figuring out.
Sorry, that took me a while to get my train of thought in that. I'm like, I knew I had lots to say, but I couldn't remember what I wanted to say at the beginning.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think you just kind of touched on this already a little bit. Sorry, here I am. But in my experience with the little bit of teaching that I've done, there's a really beautiful dialogue that happens where you learn about your own playing and about your own music making, and then you have to recycle that into your teaching a little bit, just from what you're teaching students. So I wondered what kind of experiences you've had like that. What did teaching teach you, and how did you put it back into what you're doing? Thank you.
That's such a great question. Ooh, okay. The first thing that comes to mind right off the bat is like I told you at the beginning, I was not a piano major in my undergrad. I was a choral ed major. Now the crazy thing in that was my major instrument was piano and my minor instrument was voice at the time. And I don't know why the school even let me do that. It made no sense now. Hindsight, Anyway, but so my undergrad was not piano. That wasn't my degree, right? So then I took 6 years off, right? I taught school. We went to Australia. We came back. It was 6 years later that I went back to get my master's degree, and it was a performance-based degree. I mean, it was pedagogy and performance, but it was performance, and that was a huge like changed for me. Not only had I not honestly played my piano that much in the previous 6 years, but I didn't have that original performance degree period, you know, so I was a little bit behind. But what I want to say in this is that going back to get my master's degree in performance was a huge push for me and my own skills as a pianist. And I learned a ton about like healthy technique and artistry that I didn't get in my undergrad. And that like forever changed the way that I taught my own students. I never knew how to teach good technique. You know, to me, technique was always just 5-finger patterns and chords, or, you know, like there's so much more to it, you know, trying to teach them healthy hand shape and, you know, and rotation and, you know, little to little 7-year-olds, you know, and learning those kinds of things myself, I think just made me a better teacher as well. See what else, what was the other part of your question there? Can you maybe say that again?
Yeah, I was just wondering what else you learned, like maybe even pedagogical techniques, or how to teach technique motions and things like that.
I feel like my earliest days, besides just my own, you know, what I took in from my teacher in grad school, the piano safari method was one of the really first ones I feel like that really has come up and has really taught teachers how to teach young children with good technique in a fun way. Also, Irina Gorin and Tales of a Musical Journey, I don't know if you've heard of that, has become really big in the last 10 years. And I've learned a lot from her as well. You know, some of the biggest things I've learned is starting students not playing on their thumb. So having them start with their middle fingers and your 3 and your 2 finger in piano, so that they're learning a hand shape and tall fingers, and not starting with, you know, C, D, E, F, G with their thumb, because that pulls their wrist down. And, you know, the whole entire book of Tales of a Musical Journey, book number 1, there's no thumb except for like right at the very end. And the same with Piano Safari as well. They use finger 2 and 3. So that's a really big thing. Anything else? Let me think. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that, really. Those are 2 really great resources. And I think anytime you can make technique fun and also a part of the music that they're playing, and not necessarily as just like a separate exercise, is another thing I've learned, is like just doing exercises is not fun for little kids. Like pick a song that you can teach them a movement and like make it about imagery and about like, oh, you know, do you see the monkey swinging? Yeah, can you make your arm swing like a monkey? Is what I've learned. So
Thank you.
Hey, my question is, if you could give your younger self some advice, what would you say?
ooh. Don't sweat the small stuff. No, that's an easy, that's an easy answer. Well, I would just say, and I don't know if this would necessarily be about my younger self, but I feel like this is something that's really important that I tell anybody that's, you know, young in your career. Don't be set in anything, doing anything one particular way. Like always be open to learning. Like you never know everything, never. You can, and one of my grad school teacher, this is one phrase that I will always remember. She always said, you can only know what you know in the moment. So a lot of us sometimes beat ourselves up once you start learning about better pedagogy and teaching, and you look back at all your students and you go, oh man, what did I do to those students? You know, I ruined them forever. But you can't beat yourself up about those things. I think we just have to like tell ourselves that we can just be the best teacher that we can be, and we can only know things that we know in the moment. And yes, we're always gonna like eventually learn something different down the road. And that point, you just take it for what it is there and you move forward. So, yeah, always being open to like thinking outside the box and trying things different, trying things new, like not always being set in, well, this is how I do it, or this is the one method book that I use. Like utilize lots of things and learn from lots of things out there and be willing to experiment and, try different things.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
So I had a question. So in our piano pedagogy class here, in our teaching practicum, as part of that class, we've been learning about implementing Gordon's music learning theory into teaching. And I know that you've done some great work with Joy Warren on that. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your work in that area and your research, and just how you incorporate elements of music learning theory into your.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about my progression, I guess, into music learning theory. So a couple years after I started my piano studio, like I said, I've been doing like the recreational music making classes and group classes. And so I kind of faded out of that. And I started getting a lot of inquiries for preschool piano lessons. And that's something I'd never done before. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should learn how to teach preschoolers better. And I had tried some of the books that were out there for younger piano students, like 5 and 6 year olds, like Faber's My First Piano Adventures, Little Mozart's. Actually, I haven't tried Little Mozart's, but that's one of them. Hal Leonard, I think, has one as well. And it just never seemed like the right thing. I'm like, something is disjointed here. Like, does not feel like the right thing for these kids. I know that there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I started researching a little bit more on different ways of just teaching piano to kids, and started getting into some of the early childhood music programs, like learning a little bit about Music Garden and First Steps in Music by John Feyerabend. And then with that, also music learning theory and Dr. Gordon. Now, I had known about him, like I learned about music moves for piano and music learning theory in grad school, but really didn't, jump straight into it or anything. I just kind of knew about it. And the more I started reading about it and researching, I really liked the ideas that I was hearing from them in the ways that children actually learn music. And a lot of times, the way we teach is more based on pedagogical practices, or this is the best way to teach intervals or something like that. But is this really the way that kids learn music? So I started diving in a little bit. I experimented with the keyboard games books from Music Moves for Piano, which is currently the only piano method based entirely on Dr. Gordon's work. And it was hard. I don't know if you guys know anything about it at all, but it was like black and white compared to what most traditional method books were like. And the teacher guides were very overwhelming, a lot of instruction in them, very specific instruction. And I did it for a couple years, in and out, and I never really did it exactly the way that it was intended now in hindsight, but I tried. I was learning on my own. I didn't have any training in it. I was just trying to read the teacher guides and come from this traditional piano teaching. And that's a full circle to having kids singing songs to them and moving around the studio room and what is this? I don't get this. And then their songs in the keyboard games book were they were just keeping the beat. It wasn't a song, it just felt very short and boring to me. And I was like, the problem now in hindsight, I look back and my issue was that they were boring to me. It was my preconceived notion of what songs for preschool kids should be like, or, that it wasn't interesting enough, but that's not really necessarily the case. So anyway, I was experimenting. Joy had told me that she was going to go get the training from Dr. Gordon's professional development course in the summer. And I was like, you know what? I'm interested in this too. And so we decided to do it together. We did that I think it was the summer of 2016 in Boston. It's a 2-week course. It was very intense. And one of the most overwhelming things I've ever done besides my master's degree. Makes you feel like you know nothing about music. But that goes back to the thing I was telling you earlier about thinking outside the box and being willing to say, maybe there is a better way here. So anyways, yeah, so it's just been a journey, being open to trying to incorporate the philosophies of music learning theory. Some teachers are very once you learn about it, there's definitely a desire like, oh, wow, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm baptized in music learning theory and I'm going to just completely stop doing everything I've been doing and do it completely this way. But that's really hard path to go. And the philosophy I've always taken is that I feel like there's a way to take the best of both worlds. There's got to be a way to like take elements that I've learned from music learning theory and apply it to the way that I teach today. And it doesn't mean that everything I'm doing today is the wrong way to do it, you know? And I think that's sometimes why music learning theory gets a bad rap, because it can have a little bit of that, well, this isn't so research-based, and, you know, can't you see that it's, you know, students have to be completely engrossed in sound before they have any kind of notation. And so it's been a long journey of trying to learn balance in that. The way I'm using it today in my studio is I use the keyboard games books. There's 2 books for preschool students, and which I mentioned before, and they're fabulous. I have a new light for them. Students in music learning theory, the idea is that they focus on learning elements of sound, like being able to distinguish between duple and triple meter. Okay, so beats are more about like how we orally perceive them. So it has nothing to do with how it's notated, like learning a quarter note gets 1 beat. Well, that's relative, you know? So they learn 4-beat patterns. It's patterns of music. So they would learn like ba, 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 ba. And that's a 4-beat pattern. And you can do that in any kind of order. So, okay, now I'll do this one. Ba, 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 ba. And then, you know, the students echo, and then okay, now can you create your own? Can you do one for me? You know, things like that. So oral elements of duple versus triple, and also major versus minor. So the keyboard games with my piano or my preschool students has been really big. My regular traditional students as well, I've been trying to incorporate it. Every student has a music moves for piano book that they do alongside their regular repertoire. And what the goal with those is that they're given very short, like 4-measure songs that they're like folk tunes. And they, first of all, they learn to sing the song. So they might sing the song as an assignment 2 months before they ever learn the song. And they then already like have that in their ear. And then when they go to actually play the song, they already know it. And it makes it much easier for them to play. And the short tunes have been a great gateway for them learning to then transpose into multiple keys very easily. Learning patterns of tonic and dominant. So they don't learn scales to start with, or even 5-finger patterns, because that has no context, right? So they learn like a tonic pattern is in major tonality is do, mi, so, bum, bum, bum. And you can do that in any order. And then so, fa, re, ti is a dominant pattern. And we learn to distinguish between tonic and dominant in major and minor tonalities. And then you move to subdominant. So it all has context first. And then they learn to like create from there. So they're just a good series to, like I said, to do, I feel like alongside, then maybe they have then longer pieces of repertoire that they actually learn to play, you know, and it can be complementive of each other. So that was a long, I hope you guys follow that. Okay.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't too much. I'm sorry.
Yeah. In our teaching practicum we do here, we do a lot of that. We do a group class and we do a lot of that oral training with them like that.
It's so hard to recap music learning theory without like,
Yeah.
you know, talking, going on and on about.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so. We gleaned so much information from you, so much helpful information. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Very appreciative. I know I mentioned this probably when I first asked if you were interested in doing this. This is a part of a series that our chapter is doing this year and probably into next year. We're just like interviewing composers and pedagogical influencers of our times. So yeah, we're just honored that you could be a part of that. And again, we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I hope everything was coherent.
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes you just talk and you're like, oh, I hope that all made sense.
All made great sense.
Excellent. Well, good luck to all of you guys. And thank you so much for having me. It's really honored to be asked.
Oh, and of course.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.